I think that just as we're living in a nuclear age, we have grown so tremendously in scientific knowledge, it doesn't seem too much to say that men can begin to awaken to the fact that they haven't grown enough spiritually and haven't recognized their spiritual capacities.
Once something like eating is death, then you've struck at the very heart of life. The enemy of the older radical theories may have been the ruling class. But today the stakes of whether we will reform ourselves into a new kind of human being, a new kind of society, whether we will find selves worth being, the stakes of it are simply life itself.
As modernity has created promises that it has no ability to keep. What this means is that we're a society of disembedded individuals, stuck in the impossible situation of being alone together. And what was understood as emancipation has proved to be a form of isolation. It is important to understand that what I am telling you is not simply a cultural history. It's a description of the story that shapes every single person that you know. This is why there is a rise in mental illness. It's absolutely concurrent with the disembedding of the individual, because individuals can't constitute themselves by the very nature of the case. Subjectivity cannot sustain its own weight. We need others to tell us. But we've been given an ethical mandate by the Enlightenment that tells us that that's immoral, that nobody should constrain us.
Yeah. All right. So we're here for another episode of Dustbowl Diatribes. And we have my Aunt Mary here to talk about her, I guess, experiences with gentrification and city councils. But first, I'll just introduce her as someone who is a small property owner in residential realty. Do you like that intro? Would you do it differently?
I think that's good.
Yeah.
and let me say thank you for having me. And letting you tell my story of what's happened to me as a small business owner and landlord.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mary said she didn't want me to say it because you feel like they're more scandalous than attorneys. Isn't that what you said these days?
I think right now landlords are considered like one step below attorneys, it feels like. And I think that's not fair because there's a lot of us, I think that are really trying to have people have a really good experience where they live. So, yeah, but I think if you just come out and say you're a landlord, it's like, oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And you have properties in downtown Kansas City, would you say?
Yeah, specifically, they call it Midtown. So it's technically near between the plaza and downtown. So around, Armour, 36th Street and around there.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
And then for people that listened to our last episode, most of her properties are what, like 10 blocks away from that farming project that got scuttled because of development as well. So this episode is connected with that one insofar as we're talking about how big developers disrupt not only like my aunt's business, but also that nonprofit farm. So that's what we're here to talk about today.
And that is a very good point, Spencer, because yes, big developments come in and they affect so many parts of our built environment and people's neighborhoods, and so many people they affect. Yeah, it can be a big problem. And right now it is, I'd say.
So can you lay out the nature of that big problem?
Yes. I think, well, as most people know, there's a streetcar going in. So that has really brought big developers to the table. And you can Google this, but there's so many millions of dollars that have just been spent buying up and rebuying the property along Main Street from, River Market. I guess actually from Union Station all the way over to UMKC. And there's a lot of projects in the works. And so along with that, it's attracted really big developers. that are buying up land that has been not used. Well, it looks kind of blighted, I would say, in parts of in Midtown.
Mm-hmm. And would you say it's about 30 blocks that you're talking about that the streetcar is going to traverse?
Yes.
More or less.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So basically, gentrification is happening because the city's dumping a bunch of money into the streetcar, and people see that it's a way that, like, if they make investments, that this will be like a profitable market.
Yes, exactly. So it brought a lot of people to the table. And so also with that, so the development I'm specifically talking about is, and they're doing mega projects. So this project, instead of adding just one high rise, they're adding 4 high rises. 3 of them are 10 stories tall. So we're talking about a lot of people and a lot of building in a very small area. Mm-hmm. And so would you like me to go ahead and tell you what happened, or?
Sure, unless you have any questions at this point, Laurie.
The only one would be just, are those high rises that they're going to put in mainly residential, or are they going to be like multi-purpose business properties?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yes, they're all residential, except, the thing is now they'll have on the bottom floor, they'll have retail. So there's about 25,000 square feet of retail on the bottom of those buildings. And then the rest of it is residential up above.
I see. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that adds another really big dimension to, like, the traffic flow and everything. But yeah, like at this point, why don't you just kind of tell us from your perspective how this is impacting the area and in you?
Okay, so when they put this project in, the company will just, I can call them the B company, I guess, for ease. The B company, they want to add, so this is going to add almost 400 apartments, and they only, and here's what the problem is, they only want to add 190 parking spaces. And so with that would be a problem to start with. However, there's more problems associated with that, because in the area where they're building right now, it's very unique. It's a very concentrated area of the small apartment buildings like mine, and they're 100 years old, and we don't have off-street parking. So 100 years ago, the city allowed this, and it's very dense. Like, people don't even have backyards. These buildings, a lot of them are set within like about 8 feet of the next building. They just left out the driveways behind them. There's no alleys. Mostly in Midtown, there's hardly any alleys. And I have had some buildings down there that had, my building would be right up against the building behind them, or a parking lot. So like for me, for instance, I need 34 off-street parking. And right now it is completely saturated because the B company has already, we used to have excellent parking 20 years ago when I started. But then when the B company came in, their people have like taken all the parking, and now my people fight for parking. And already at night, it's not too bad yet, but they probably, I don't like this, but I might have, a couple of girls, I might have to walk a block to get home, or 2 in the dark, which is not good. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, which is something I experienced in the 1 year I lived there. There would be times I'd have to walk a block or 2 to park.
Yes, and so right now, I mean, we can do it, but the problem with them not, the city not requiring and actually working with them to have less parking, they're going to add, we figured out 500 plus cars. So I counted, because it's important, there are like 265 parking spaces in this area, and they're all full, and then they're going to dump twice that many on there. So I'm like, what's going to happen? Are people going to have to walk 4 or 5 blocks to get home? And it's just a really bad situation, and it could have been prevented. I mean, there are things that other cities are doing they could have done, but I just found that obviously the developer didn't care, but the city didn't either. They completely sided with the developer, and no concern about the 480 people that live in that neighborhood and the 250 small buildings that have to park on the street.
Do you think that the what are we calling them? B Corporation is like telling the people who might live in their buildings when they sell those properties or rent them, that they're going to have to walk potentially 4 to 6 blocks away, because a lot of people that there wouldn't even, so they just not saying anything about that.
Oh, no. And I get tenants from their buildings. They don't take care of their people, and no, they won't tell people. I don't think they'll tell people. I will, because people ask me, and I really like what I do. So I will say that. And that's probably the first or second question I get is how is parking right now? And I have to be honest, and yeah, but no, they won't tell people. And a lot of people don't know to ask, a lot of the young people come and don't know to ask. Yeah.
Right. And then I'd just add, most of the money for this company is coming from another bigger city in the Midwest. So there's another dynamic where there's all this capital flowing into downtown Kansas City, and because it's looking for investment, which is a theme where we talk about in the show, about sort of like the blind nature of capitalism, that like you're trying to maintain your small business, but when like a bigger tap of capital flows in, it can mess up your business and your tenants' lives to some degree. But. Yes,
and what is very discouraging and disillusioning and all sorts of bad words is that the city, who that there is so much demand for along the streetcar, the city didn't have to help them or anything. They could, and they have no restrictions on them. They don't say, they don't work with the neighborhoods at all because they don't care, I guess. I hate to think they don't care, but that's what it looks like. In this situation, the city manager and mayor supported this, and there was no concern for the problems it would create. And again, Berkeley and Los Angeles, they have a piece in place to help with this. And our city didn't even look at that. There was no concern at all. It was just like, let's just get this project going. But my point is, the project would have been going without them, because they wanted the money and they're right on the streetcar. So they didn't need any incentives or any help. Mm-mm.
Mm-hmm. Although, didn't they try and get incentives as well? Like by saying,
oh my gosh,
it would be low income housing.
Oh my gosh, it was so bad last year. Oh my gosh, they wanted, and they asked for, and they almost got it. They asked for $10 million to add a net 20 affordable housing units, 20. And so I think I wrote that down. That's 500. Obviously it's not a good use of city money, but $10 million. And it was going to be net, because they already had, it was supposed to add 89, but they already had 60 ready to go in an old building that's derelict. So it was just such a farce, but that one got voted down. But this year they came back, and 5 times they said no incentives, kept saying that. And then they were just, lying by omission. They were going for incentives, but they didn't go through the city. They went through the KCHEA, the Kansas City Area Transit Authority. So I guess big surprise, developers lie, but it's just real disillusioning. And they didn't get that, surprisingly, either. But yeah, they were asking for incentives for that too, after they said they weren't.
And was that as well? I remember, or at least there's been some talk about how the city wants to define low income housing as like $1,200 a month. Was that was that part of, we want 5 to 10 million so we can only charge people $1,200 a month? Was that, or were those two things distinct?
No, that's exactly right. It was actually, I think, about $1,1100 to $1,200 for a 1-bedroom, which KC tenants fought against. And that is a big thing why they got voted down, and they put the $10 million in a trust fund, which would be, I think, a lot better to help the people who really need it, instead of a developer adding just 20 units. So yes, but $1,100 for a 1-bedroom. And again, a lot of my apartments, as a small business person, I don't charge people sometimes what I just try not to gouge them. And 1,100 is a lot. I don't have any one bedrooms for 1,100. And I have some nice apartments, but they're not 1,100. I think my highest right now, my highest one bedroom is 950. Yeah.
Yeah, I've looked around in that area, and that struck me as odd that they would say that $1,200 a month is low income, because that's definitely not, it's not what the market says there. I'm glad that failed. It doesn't surprise me that the city falls for things like that, though. I think that that's really universal. Manhattan here has similar stories of basically being more or less giving corporations all kinds of incentives and even free property, and sometimes they just simply walk away from it or only use it for a while, never fulfill their end of the bargain. It's really common. And the other thing I'm thinking of here is that, we have people at universities, public administration specialists, they're being paid by the public to study these kinds of things and to tell cities what will work from all sorts of vantage points, including livability and, transportation access and things like that. But they don't tend to consult them. They don't talk to each other. It's very frustrating. So the kind of situation that you're describing happens. And when you look at it, you're like, how could this happen? These are all intelligent people here, right? But
yeah, exactly, Laurie, exactly. I know. And I think all I can think of is that it seems like it's agenda driven. Like, people have this very narrow scope of what they want. And they can't look outside that to see how they're affecting, everything around them. And to your point, you can't really blame a developer. I mean, if people are giving out candy, you can't really blame the developer for not reaching out their hand and going, me, right? If they're giving out free money, I get it. But yeah, it's not a good system.
And speaking of that, could you talk a little bit about your favorite council person and how his narrow interests fit in to the B corporation's narrow interest in like a syncretistic way?
Yes, and he is a current council person, and it's just been really sad because his and I guess I should say allegedly, but I don't know. It's really sad because I think it's good that he likes, he's very into transportation and, and that, we use cars too much. Well, I agree with that, whatever, but we need our cars. But it's so focused, it's just about bikes. And what happens with that is you just cannot be that narrow-minded, I don't think, and deal with the needs of your constituency. I mean, there's small business needs. Oh my gosh, our biggest problem is crime. There's crime, small businesses, affordable housing. There's just a lot more issues besides bikes and transportation. And I understand in the long term, you want to work towards that. But this extreme limitation has caused a lot of problems, which has shown up on the Truman Road, which you guys are familiar with, along Truman Road, when they put in bike lanes without consulting small businesses enough, and the consequences there.
Right. So yeah, I live on the allegedly bad part of the town, on the other side of the red line. Although my cars only get stolen on the good side of town. So, but yeah, Truman Road in the past, I don't know, was it last fall that this happened? They just
just now, I think even too was. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
I think it looks like they're going to keep going with it, or like they didn't do the whole street. But they took what was like a 6 lane. They took that and they put in these bike lanes in this street that's like pretty grimy. It's mostly known for having car shop, auto body repair stuff. So you had all these shops that would have people park like in the far right lane. So you still had 2 lanes of traffic. Now they put this bike lane in that we've seen one person on a bike and one person in a wheelchair using in 6 months. And Now the shops that are protesting are parking to the left of the bike lane, which means that street only has one lane of traffic. And I'm sympathetic as far as it goes that, like, if we could have more public transit or be riding bikes, that would be one thing. But just putting in bike lanes doesn't solve the fact that, like, I live in a neighborhood where they have all the truck shops, and the primarily Hispanic population is commuting to do service jobs in the rest of town. And, like, they're not going to hop on a bike.
Right.
And it's dangerous to hop on a bike. So it's just another example of, you know, basically, like, white middle class people, they can have these good intentions, or, you know, to whatever extent they actually have good intentions, but it's more complicated to green your city than just say cars are bad and we should get rid of them. Especially when it would be one thing if, let's say, this city council person was like the mayor and, like, the city dictator, and he, like, actually had the power to really change things.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, like, get a hold of a few $100,000 and install bike lanes, and then that's about all he can do. It seems like.
Yeah, it seems like it exists in a vacuum. Like, again, you know, it's just this too narrow focus.
Mm-hmm. But you line him up with a developer that's saying, yeah, do we need, yeah, I mean, yeah, there's going to be 200 extra people that don't have a parking space, but they'll just take the streetcar or they'll just ride the bikes. And he's like, well, yeah, they should. Well, do you agree with that?
Oh my gosh, that's exactly right. And yeah, maybe they quote should, but people won't. And, you know, I have 70 tenants, and this is the first time in 20 years, I think I have 2, maybe 3 people without a car, but that is, like, so strange. I mean, everybody has a car. So my people all have a car. And let's face it, if you have a 2-bedroom apartment, there are 2 cars. And at my studio building, which is, you know, 1 person, sometimes I have 14 cars because I had 2 couples at one time. They both had a car. And these are supposed to be the, quote, poor people that are paying $750 a month, which is affordable housing. But here is what I would say. What the problem is too is if they run me, quote, out of town, I'm providing these lower income places, which people want, but how do I stay in this? I mean, if I don't, you know, if I have to go, they'll turn my apartments, make them more expensive. And then you're going to lose 70 people. So 70 people will have less affordable housing. That's a start, you know, that's not good.
First thought is they should make the councilman just ride around town on a bike and see how long he keeps his bike.
Good point. Yes. Yes.
You can't even keep a bike around here in Manhattan, Kansas. I'm sure it isn't going to last very long over there, especially not a fancy one that he might ride.
Oh, well, guess what? Oh, Laurie, excuse me just a minute. He, okay, and I need to say allegedly, I think, but I know because I'm nearby. He rides the free city bike and attaches it to his pole outside. So if it gets stolen, he doesn't care. It'll just become another free bike from the city.
Gotcha. Okay, so he's got that figured out anyway.
Yeah, he does.
Doesn't he allegedly also own a car or 2 himself?
I was really surprised to find that out. Yes, he does. So I was really surprised to hear that. Yes, but he does. And I think he should put his money where his mouth is, but I'm not bitter and not have a car.
And just for a little more flavor, for a while, I don't know what happened to change it, but for a while, he somehow got his block cordoned off. So you would be driving down the street and then you would hit the block where his house is.
Yes.
And it would be like, what did it say? Like, attention, the street is for people or something like that. Yes. Uh-huh. Yeah. And that was, like that was allowed during COVID, but maybe a dog. Yes. But again, during COVID, that was allowed. But the problem was, again, he didn't think about us a block away and what he did to our traffic, or, you know, there was no concern about just himself. I mean, it's bikes and him and his family. I mean, he can't look beyond that, or how it affected the traffic flow. It made my street really bad for traffic. Right. And I've had people get, you know, anyway, some bad stuff happen because of more traffic. Yeah.
But yes, some bad things going on.
Mhm. Yep. But that is a lot of people's mentality of like, I don't like X. How can I just remove X from my immediate environment and let me spend a bunch of time focusing on that? While they aid and abet forces that are going to like make what they want to do also impossible. You know, like he believes the streets for people. Well, what happens if like Corporation B finishes their like whole gentrification scheme? How many people will be around on that block, and will he actually be happy? But I realize that's maybe a kind of like social calculus. And if you're still figuring out algebra, he's probably not thinking that far ahead.
Oh, no, probably not. And Laurie, I'm sorry. I think I interrupted you. You had a couple points.
Oh, no, I had a question actually. I would like to know, how are you feeling the impact of this for your own business? Like, how is it affecting you? And what are the dynamics that might almost like squeeze you out? Because it sounds like you are somewhat concerned about that.
That's a good question. The nice thing is that it's not going to be finished until 2026, but 2024 is going to start the construction, which is going to bring in a lot of traffic and a lot of cars. This big corporation had a smaller project, just a 2-story project, and it was a big mess around there. So these are going to be, 4 towers. So I can't imagine how much, traffic and parking they're going to take. So, but to answer your question, so in the short term, I'm going to have to start telling people when I rent to them in 24, about what's coming. Right now, I don't have to tell them anything, but, I have to be honest with them that, this is what it's going to look like 6 months from now. And the other thing, it's more like, okay, it's more about like I would leave too right now is because property values are really high and they have changed what I loved about Midtown. I mean, it's a very, I'd say it's not a very respected area, of town. It's kind of, we call it the Golden Ghetto is what we call it. And,
Who is we?
It's just kind of a term that people use about Midtown sometimes. And golden, because it is a really nice, it's golden, but it's also considered the ghetto. I mean, and I shouldn't say that, but, people look down on it. But for those of us that are down there, we really like our neighborhood, But the problem is it's going to change the whole dynamic. I mean, I have gardens down there and I walk around and pick up trash, but, if there's not parking and stuff, and then there's going to be all this traffic, it's not going to be the same thing I've done for 21 years. So I've lost an area that I love, changed forever.
And did it, like, how does it feel? Like, when we talk about gentrification, we usually talk about, like, lower income people or minorities being pushed out because they can't afford the rent. What has it been like as a landlord to kind of like see this wave coming at you and knowing that like your fate is actually a lot like the tenants that won't be able to afford the quote unquote low income housing?
Oh, I think that's true because they're talking, and I think especially around the streetcar, like, the big corporations like the B Corporation, they get tax exemptions for many years. So I think, so they're paying a lot less on the streetcar, but there's a streetcar tax I've already started paying for my buildings. I have a neighbor, she's almost 80. I don't know how long she can hang on. She was the one that saved my block where I bought my first building because it was a derelict area 21 years ago. And they saved the neighborhood. We did their building beautifully. And, she's paying $7,000 property taxes. It's supposed to go up 30% this year. I don't know how she can afford to stay at her home. And she helped save the neighborhood. So there's a big gentrification problem right there.
Mm-hmm. And do people, in your estimate, do fellow landlords perceive this as a gentrification and like capital pushing them out? Or are they just like, oh, this stupid council person I don't like, it's all his fault? And if he had just been smart, then my problem would go away. Like, how deeply do they think about it?
I think, well, a lot of them, and me included, I think it's fine. I mean, I don't like modern buildings, so I'm not a big fan of these cheap, they call them pack and stack buildings they're putting up all over. I'm not a fan of that, but I'm all for like free capital or whatever you would call it, where, you know, like, sure, if you buy a piece of land, you should be able to do what you want on it without harming other people, like do no harm. So I think a lot of us think it's fine that the B corporation builds whatever they want. They just don't want to be affected by it, you know, negatively. And I don't think we're not really blaming the council person, except that, you know, instead of staying neutral or even helping us, he helped he helped somebody who didn't need help. And normally, and I think in a perfect world, the council people represent their constituency. I mean, this is a Chicago company. It's like, why are you helping? And allegedly, like, well, are you getting money? I mean, why do you care so much? Like, why are you helping a big corporation instead of your neighbors that, you know, in your neighborhood? Yeah. But I think most of us say, sure, build what you want. And I think more of us think, you know, why isn't the city paying more attention to those of us that pay their salary? I think they need to think about our constituents. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. Although to briefly play devil's advocate for this Chicago-based company, couldn't they say, well, actually, we're the real beneficiaries of Midtown, because look at how many millions of dollars we're ready to dump, and we're going to create so many places where when all the, you know, when the tech people continue to flee California, don't you want them to come here? Don't you want them to be paying sales tax? Don't you want them to be supporting the like Starbucks at the below them in their apartment complex? We're the real beneficiaries, and you guys are like stuck in the mud, and you're dealing with your old buildings, which, yeah, they have character, but like, let's get with it. Let's be modern, progressive.
Yes. I think that's true. I think that's true. And
like that's their position, or what do you think is true?
Oh, I don't think they even think about it. I think it's just numbers and what they need for money. And I think it's pretty ruthless and cutthroat. And I think a lot of people I don't know how many people don't really appreciate old buildings. I don't understand that at all. So it's hard for me to understand that people don't. But I think they would just bulldoze us over and build right on top of us, 7 or 8 story buildings.
Mm-hmm. And tell you that this is a more ecologically sustainable way to live.
I'm sorry.
And they would no, but I think they would make the argument too that they'll be more like better insulated, and that this is a greener way to have a downtown Kansas City.
Well, I think they've stepped on the most recent trend, which they learned from other cities. It's like, oh, we want everybody, it's called transit oriented development or something, TOD, but they want a whole bunch of people in a small area by the transportation. But the problem is we don't have our transportation in Kansas City isn't very good. Like, the bus system isn't reliable, and maybe they'll fix that. But, but they're just missing pieces. It's like, I don't know, did you say, Spence? They just do stuff, but it's in a vacuum, and they didn't see other things that affect it. It's all in a vacuum, and it didn't work,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's the new thing. You want lots of density, no parking, which, sure, but, do the other pieces with it too. Like, let's look at this holistically. Or like Laurie said, I mean, my gosh, like what ego thinks that they know so much that they just make decisions in a vacuum? Like, why not ask the experts? Like, how hard would that be? Like, I know I don't know some stuff. It's like, hello, people, like just ask the experts or see how it went in some other city. Yeah.
Yeah, great point. See how it went in some other city, because there are like articles and books galore about that, and people right in this area, in your area, as well as elsewhere, that know all that and who could be, helping them make this decision. if they cared about that. It's not for lack of information that stuff like this happens. I may be going off on a little bit of a tangent, but as I was listening to you talk about your own properties and your tenants and relative to like this development that's going on, it sounded to me like you have an attachment to your property of an emotional nature, as well as to the tenants that you serve and that pay you rent, and that is a meaningful part of your experience as a property owner. Whereas I think what Spencer is saying is like the development represents just an investment. It's just, who knows what's even behind it. And it's coming from another place. And it's got a lot of money and it's coming in and it's doing these things. And I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on the value of that. I mean, some people would say, well, that's an antiquated, thing to care about the place that you own like that, like whether it's an old building that ought to be preserved or whether it's, a neighborhood that has a certain character. It's kind of like antiquated. It has to go, so to make way for progress. I myself, I've only owned one other property that I rented out for any length of time. And I found myself weirdly attached to it in the sense that I didn't want it to be substandard for the person living there. Yeah, because I felt some pride in that. So I fixed it up more than I needed to because of that. And I can't even characterize exactly what that is, but I was wondering if you would maybe talk a little bit about that, about the difference between maybe what a smaller owner feels and thinks about their property opposed to what an investor might think.
Oh, I think that is so true. And just at the very least, it is such a purpose for me. People say, oh, just sell out. But it's no, you don't get it. I wasn't just punching a time card and went to a place and put my time in. This is what I do. This is me. This is, it's just everything. I mean, but I think a lot of landlords aren't like me, but I go down almost every day, especially in my busy season. But, I'm down there and I pick up trash in the neighborhood and I fight graffiti. Anyway, it was just more than just a job. I'm sorry. It's hard for me that this has all happened because it's kind of an era that's over. But I think, I think it is about a small business people. I think we have more to offer. I think people that live in the buildings have a better life. My people know that I care, so they don't have to worry about anything. They can just live their lives. And how nice is that they don't have to worry about anything in their building? And between them and their payment is someone that cares. I mean, even between them and a mortgage or whatever, a bank won't care, but I'm in the middle. I care. But yeah, you wouldn't see that in a big building. But personally, I just think we need historic buildings, and I don't want a modern city with no soul. I think these older buildings and these smaller buildings bring a soul to the city. It'll be really sad when they go, and I wasn't ready to quit, and I don't know if I am, but I feel kind of like getting forced out. And I didn't really think about that till Spencer said, but the gentrification is happening to us landlords too. And I guess they'll get us one way or another with property taxes or no parking, or I don't know. Yeah.
What would cause you to finally say, I can't do it?
I guess that, I would go down to work on my buildings and work on my gardens and talk to people. And I'd have to start maybe renting to people that I'll get tenants that I wouldn't want. Like right now, I really like my tenants too. I mean, there's the fair housing thing and I applied that, but I also like who I rent to, and so maybe I guess I'd have to take tenants I don't like, or I don't know what would and financially I could get forced out. If I can only rent my buildings half full because there's no parking and everyone, knows that you can't park in Midtown and they want a car. I don't know. That could force me out too. If my buildings are half rented because there's no parking on the street, also the tall buildings are going to block some of the sunshine. And might have this beautiful studio building with all these windows, and they're going to block the sun part of the day because the towers are 10-story tall. That would affect how much I get on rent. I'm going to be disappointed showing the apartments going, I'm sorry, it used to be beautiful, but now there's a 10-story building right here, and I'm sorry, it blocks your east light here. So I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take, but it makes me really sad. It makes me really sad. And for my neighbor who's 80, and the point is I don't know a lot of neighbors because most of us in this small area are these small apartment buildings. In this 8-block area, there's only maybe 3 or 4 houses. So, the houses, it's mostly these small, beautiful little historic buildings that are going to be affected. So, but she's one that's going to get hurt, and she doesn't have off-street parking either. Right now, she parks over a sidewalk to park at her place, and she's handicapped too. She has a walker. Why would she have to move? Right? I don't know.
So could you talk some more about you got a high-priced lawyer and you were weren't you trying to basically have them build a parking lot or something so that their parking wouldn't overflow onto you? Was that the fight you were trying to win, or what was it?
Well, it's even harder than that. Yes. The normal parking should be 1-to-1, which isn't enough, but, and 1-to-1 would be better, but, we're starting with a big problem with parking already. So it's acute already, right? So he was hired to really, in our system, to get access to the council people. A lot of times, I found that you need to have an attorney that can advocate for you. So I hired him. He was a development attorney to, work with the council people, because the developer certainly has all his people lined up. He had the mayor and the city manager and, and the council people on his side. So we needed someone to lobby for us. And us, it was harder. But yeah, anyway, to stay on point, yes, he was hired to lobby and, get us some help at City Hall to help, because, right, you need votes and you need help and attention.
Mm-hmm. And if you don't want to go down this road, but it's fine. But knowing how things turned out, which was you basically getting none of what you wanted, would you hire him again if you could go back in time?
No, I wouldn't, because I would tell you that we really didn't get anything, and that's unusual. I used to work up at City Hall for a council person, and they used to listen to the neighbors and the constituents. And in this thing, it was so the other way. It was all about the developer, and and I know this goes on, but they traded votes and all that. But this, I was hoping that he would lobby. My expectation was he was going to lobby, the council people, and that didn't happen so much. So, no, for the amount of money I spent, it was really disappointing. Really disappointing. Yeah. I would fight again, but it didn't go well. Yeah.
Well, and I wanted to just, I guess, get your reaction to this, because the podcast after this one, we're going to hash out, it's basically going to be a more collective postmortem and why that whole project didn't work out. But I want to get your reaction to this. Imagine a world where more did work out, and imagine where you could take all that money that you basically wasted on the high price lawyer. If you could have basically funded me and Chad and Eric to go around and try and recruit tenants who could see that we're going to lose our parking place and the whole character of Midtown's going to change. And I mean, I still insist the logo of this company already looks vaguely demonic. If you just put some devil horns on it, there would be ways kind of like basically just like incite the masses, for lack of a better term. I'm not saying that get pitchforks out, but you could get more attendance to that council meeting than turned out in actuality. I guess I'm just wanting your reaction to, how does that alternative future strike you? Does that sound insane or utopian? Or would it at least be better in the actual dimension we're living in?
Well, I like the pitchfork thing, but no, that was a problem this way, because I think my opinion, that I think that KC tenants get some traction because there's a lot of them. But we were limited, fighting this, because there weren't property owners. It was just maybe 13 of us that owned the buildings that had so many people in them. And, if you're a tenant, okay, the tenants they're not going to be there probably in 3 years. So, and, I thought I could get it accomplished without, asking the people I had help us. I thought the attorney was going to do a lot of this, but, in retrospect, I should have had feet on the ground and more of that. But it really didn't seem like it was the tenant's responsibility, because they're not going to be there in 3 years when the project comes in. So how do you mobilize them? But I'll tell you who, if I can, who really did help us. And what I learned from this is that it's really important who your council people are. And I am very much supporting Christy Dastrup. She's running for 4th District, and she helped me more than anybody, or us. She helped me more than the attorney. She met with me and didn't want anything in return, but she was very responsive, and she had connections at City Hall, and I know she can do a lot of good when she's in there. Just listen to us and give us a say at the table where we should have one. I mean, we're local, we're paying taxes. Hello,
And on that note, could you talk a bit about how your fellow landlords and house owners in that neighborhood, like, didn't you find that most of them didn't want to get involved with fighting this?
Yeah, but again, there were so few of us, because those of us selected, I think maybe there were, I said 13, there might, but really who's affected, it's probably like 8 or 9 of us, but we have what, 200 or 300 apartments between us. So those few people, that's just not enough for people to listen to, and we don't have any lobbying power, and we had no relationships built up with the council people. Like, the B Corporation has been here, I don't know how long, but they have all these quote friends in high places that we didn't have. And if you have council people that, we just didn't have, we were starting from zero and didn't have enough time to even organize, and we didn't have the connections we needed. And those 8 or 10, I don't know how many, 13 of us, however few there are. I think I would tell you that landlords are kind of quirky or odd. We're an odd bunch. But and we, right? What? What?
But not eccentric.
No, because we all know that is one step from crazy. No, we're not eccentric, I would say. But we work independently. Like, I didn't even know some of these landlords until I tried to tell everybody what was happening. But no, we don't work together, and we want to work alone. And that's why we foraged into this kind of, this kind of profession. We are not people that work together or follow rules generally or anything. So that really hurt us too, I would tell you. Yeah. And then I was surprised because, people cared, but they didn't want to work on it. So it was, several of us doing a lot. And I'd like to say, our homes association, our president was really helpful. And she was trying to help us, even though, she lives in a house. She was very helpful. Yeah. But Christy Dastrup, she was just really good. So I think it's really important that people vote locally And now I understand why. I mean, I was trying to get far away from City Hall after I quit work, but in retrospect, I should have stayed involved and kept those connections. Yeah.
But yet at the same time, you, just from the point of view of justice, one shouldn't have to make staying in touch with city council like a part-time job just to protect one's property and business. It doesn't, basically, because what you're saying is in order to like have any political relevance so that you don't get squashed, you've got to devote, X number of hours a week to hobnobbing with the city council and so on.
Yes. And I would allege, I think I'm supposed to say allege that, money, I would imagine, I don't know if money changed hands. I don't know, but I know, I don't know. It's ugly. I don't know. The whole process was ugly. And if they had done, and we tried to tell them, but they had done this in Berkeley and Los Angeles. And it was really simple and straightforward. There, they could just give parking permits to our area, this kind of 8-block area, and just say, and then not let the B Corporation park all these additional people in that area. But they didn't even want to do that. They wouldn't look at that. And it worked really good. It's working right now in Berkeley. And also that is such a good piece, because if new people coming in say, oh, you can't park and you can park 3 blocks that way, maybe they would get what they want, which is encouraging people to not have cars. But you see that those missing pieces that they were told about, but that's not what they wanted. They didn't care. Just didn't care.
Right. And just to play devil's advocate, is it possible that there wasn't like financial malfeasance or malevolent intentions? Is it possible that they're just stupid and or incompetent?
I think it's ego some that I just think people think, oh, this is a good idea. And so they just do it without doing the scientific method. I think the scientific method is you're supposed to see what a problem is and then work on up. They just went to the very end and then didn't even look at any of the problems that existed with the scientific method. And I don't think it was really malevolent or personal or anything like that. But I think there was an agenda at the city. It sounds like the next step is they're going to, which is crazy and all sorts of words I would use, but they want to put in parking meters in front of all these historic buildings and make money for the city, and normally use parking meters in a central business district, not a residential area. But their whole idea is no matter how many cars we have, people shouldn't be parking, so we're just going to move them around a lot. Well, that's not good for my tenants. They can't come out every so often and feed a meter, right? But that I think they always had an agenda, and so they didn't need a parking garage for this developer. I think they think this parking meter of just moving people around all the time is going to take care of it.
Sounds like they forgot the people live there. That's,
Yes.
I don't have to move my car every 8 hours outside of my house, why should tenants be, that's crazy.
Thank you. I know. And that's it's, but really it feels, but yeah, it doesn't feel benevolent or personal. It just feels like very tunnel vision and not, but and they even had a parking meeting where the parking Nazi, we'll call him, he just said, it was called a listening session, huh?
He's allegedly a Nazi, right?
Allegedly, yes. But they said it was a list. They called it a listening session. They wouldn't even let people ask questions hardly. They called it a listening session where they proceeded to say why parking meters were good in an area where we live, where we don't want parking meters. And I think you guys would say you wouldn't want a parking meter in front of your house either. It's ludicrous. But these are, and I think, is the ego so big that these are not good ideas. I have an urban planning degree, a master's in urban planning. I mean, give things a little more thought, I would think, people. I don't know.
Yeah, sadly, I do think a lot of it boils down to just arrogance, really. I mean, that's what I've seen through it, studying the stuff. I teach an administrative ethics class, and so I deal with the public administration side just a little bit in what I do. And, we look through these various cases of administrative failure, basically, and unethical behavior. And it really does often boil down to they just didn't even bother to ask anybody.
Oh, exactly.
Just did what they thought was right and blocked out any, didn't want to hear any other information. And it does really smack of arrogance, just like, well, I just know what I'm doing.
Oh, it sure feels that way. That's what I would attribute it to. Like, yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
And I picture, because I'm not bitter, but but I picture these kids were the ones, that I went to grade school with, and they were maybe in the third row and had trouble spelling, and now they got a little power, and they weren't real smart back then. They didn't automatically get real smart, and they should ask around. But I'm a big believer in, I always like to gather a lot of information. Like and maybe other people aren't like that, but I like to ask a lot of questions and really get all the information and then make a decision, and maybe, I guess, obviously other people aren't like that.
But they see that big, shiny project, just like, I'm not thinking of churches, which sounds really incongruous, but like there's a phenomenon where, they knock down the older church to build the newer, bigger, better church that costs millions of dollars. And why? Because it, it's just so exciting, and it makes a statement. It's going to bring people, and, there's all these feelings going on about how great it's going to be. And it's not that they're like actively not thinking about the people who were there before, who might like it the way it was, who have memories, who, no, they're just not thinking of that. They're so like attached to this big, shiny vision of, grandeur that they then can associate themselves with. And then a developer comes along and says, I can give you that great feeling. All you have to do is say yes.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
kind of
absolutely.
Like a timeshare.
Oh, absolutely. And, they always call that, it's sexy. That's way more sexy than talking about, like, I don't want to talk about parking spaces. I don't even want to think about them. Like, I learned a lot about the neighborhood when the project came down. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize there were all small apartment buildings here. Like, I'm down there a lot. I'm down there every day, for some of the year. I don't know how much, but my busy season. But, I'm like, I didn't know this, but, please ask the people that live there what they want, and if I could tell you, the problem too with these new buildings and having the retail underneath is they don't, a lot of them stay vacant, which is terrible. And I get they need to make a certain amount of money, but I would imagine they'd try to charge too much rent, and then they can't have local shops, and even the big chains don't go in there. I mean, a lot of these new developments are empty on the first floor. Well, that isn't good at street level either. And this particular development we're talking about, well, they honestly, so far they've given them like the lowest number of areas where they can, bring stuff in and out. I mean, I don't know how you would exist as a business there. I mean, people couldn't park. I don't know, but I think it's going to be empty on that bottom floor. Who's going to help with that? But why not say no sometimes to a developer? Why not have one requirement on them, like, for, I don't know, 5 years, you're going to charge this much rent for this floor, or, for this space, or some kind of work with them, like do some kind of work with the developer. I mean, they give out the candy, but they have no requirements on them. And then you get these bad things where, we're not even going to get retail from it. I mean, it's going to sit empty like their other buildings have. Yeah.
Honestly, it sounds like they would have to require them to build a parking garage.
Except that this was a perfect storm, or whatever you'd say. These, it's about $40,000 a space for a parking garage. So, and this corporation, which I get it, they're all about money, and I get it. That's what they're supposed to do. So they're all about, well, we can save, $1 million or $2 million by not putting in a parking garage. So they met the two perfect goals together: lots of density, no parking at this one area to meet this transit-oriented transit-oriented density or something that they're all trying to do now. It's the new buzzword. So they're all trying to do that right now. So, and also the corporation is actually tearing down a third of an existing garage. That's great. I mean, it's like, you just can't, it's like, there's so many things wrong with this. And then they have there's two, I don't know, there's just more, but it's just, it sounds bad. And then you just keep finding out more things about it. Yeah. But yes, they're tearing down a third of a parking garage.
Right.
So you mentioned early on that undergoing this process has been disillusioning. Like, are there other illusions that you've been disabused of that we haven't talked about, or has your whole perspective on life changed, or what's that been?
Oh, wow. No, it helped me get perspective in what's really important in my life. Like, I have enough money to live on, so I'll be fine. And I know my family, Spencer, is real important, and my animals and my friends, and it gave me some perspective that way. And I know that things happen in life, and it's not malevolent or anything. This just happens, like Walmart's come in and take away the mom and pop shops, and we all have things happen that make our life a little less shiny than it used to be, But what I have learned about it too is I think it's really important. Like, I'm campaigning for Chrissy Dastrup, and I understand that it's important that we have council people that support their constituents. And so I have tried to use my power for good and put my energy where it makes a difference. But yeah, it's hard to see that, but I think it happens. And, but I think we'd lose a lot when we lose the small business people like me. Even in the local stores, like, it's Generica. Like, we don't want to just have a Starbucks. We want, the local Mad Hatters, or where Emily works, or you want the small local buildings that give some, some difference so it's not all the same. And so it has been disillusioning. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So if you could go back in time 10 or 20 years, would you do anything differently?
No, I'd still buy these beautiful old historic buildings that people love to live in. They're charming. They're lovely. I would still buy in that neighborhood. I would understand that things do change, and I would appreciate more when I'm having a rough day in the summer, maybe. I try to appreciate that day a little bit more because I know it's going to change someday. I would do that differently. I would take more time to have some free time in the summer instead of just rushing to a McDonald's for a lunch. I would plan more time with friends, because usually in the summer it's 10 or 12-hour days, and I just rush from one thing to another. So I think along the way I would have, that sounds cheesy, stop and smell the roses. I think I also would have had to, as a business person, although it shouldn't have to be that way, but I would try to stay more connected with my council people, or even who's running, and I would try to anticipate dangers ahead of time. Like, I should have anticipated more and not trusted. I trusted that there would be better decision making at the city, and I shouldn't have done that. I just thought there'd be better decision making. So I didn't anticipate that. I wish I had. Yeah.
I guess I also have a question too, if that's okay. Let's also hypothetically go back even a few years from now of, let's say that all of these organizations, just thinking of the last episode that Spencer and Laurie recorded, where they talked to a farmer who used to work for a nonprofit that's in the same neighborhood roughly. And they're also finding, again, the same entity. Let's say that like there was more, I don't know, overlap between all these organizations, that even the local tenants organization like was willing to like talk to landlords, which I think is worth mentioning if you want to talk about your experience with like tenant organizers too, real quick, Mary. That is probably worth hearing for some people.
Oh, that's good. That's right, Emily. Like we do need to work together. Like I didn't even know other landlords. I just had their phone number, but I don't talk to them. And then like I didn't and we should work with like the tenants organization, I think. But Casey Tenants, my tenants, they're a local, and I think they've made great headway for helping tenants. And I mean, they can be my enemy or my friend, but they won't even let me go to a meeting. What, Spence?
Real quick, could you explain what that headway has been?
Oh, for Casey Tenants?
Yeah.
Oh, well, and I think they have gotten the city. I mean, for the first time, all three candidates for the 4th district have all mentioned affordable housing. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, that's amazing. But along with that, I think they need to make sure that they don't put people out of business. Like, I think there's not an understanding about what landlords go through, because I would hope there's a lot of good ones out there. I hope there is. I mean, I know some. I mean, I hope I am. I try. I just think they have to be careful the motives or what they do, so they don't put us out of business. And I wish they'd work with us, but my tenants have invited me to the meeting and to go to the Casey Tenants meeting, and I've been disinvited. They said I couldn't come because I was a landlord. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like we're not all bad. And I think they should work with us. Besides, I have, quote, the affordable housing they're talking about. So I think, and the problem is if my buildings get bought up, they're going to turn into more higher priced places. That's just going to happen. I don't have granite in mine. I don't like granite. I like to keep the old kitchens because they stay charming that way. But if they need to help us small ones, because, these 70 and 80, they're going to get bought out and turned into higher dollars. So I think it would help Casey Tenants to work with us. I think we might have the same goals even.
Yeah. Which again is like, how much of a failure is it on like their long-term mission to like not work with also someone that's like crucial to what they want, essentially, of again, like say 5 years down the line, maybe less, that what if they had worked with you guys? What if you guys were also working with like the historic neighborhood association or like anything like that? Because this is also like a historic neighborhood, which hopefully means something. But
yes, thank you. And
it's parking meters in. I don't know how much.
I know. I mean, it will take away from the aesthetics on the street. Like, but I think we do need to work better alone. But, and I'm at fault of this. I was working in a bubble. I didn't want to get involved with any of these groups or even my fellow landlords. I want to do, like, this is probably what we want to do. Like, I want to work on my buildings and have my 3 gardens and, and that kind of thing, instead of, really going to going to landlord meetings or, some of this is my fault. I mean, looking back 20 years, we should have had a landlord organization that was more in keeping with maybe the values I have, not just about money, because I don't have bad tenants. My biggest problem is contractors. People think tenants are a problem. I maybe have one problem with the tenant a year. It's just not a problem. I don't know. So, yeah. But that's a good point, Emily. We should all work together. And in a perfect world, or even, I would have, liked to help, like that. Those people with the garden, they didn't have a chance either. They came in late to the game like I did. It was already decided for them. They didn't have enough time to build up, quote, their army. You just don't have time. I mean, that developer over there, I mean, they've been around doing this for, I don't know, well, at least 10 or 12 years. Yeah.
I've always liked the phrase, you're either at the table or you're on the menu.
Oh, wow. Laurie, what do you think of that? Boy, that's good, Spence.
It sounds like the state of nature, basically, where everybody is in competition with everybody else. And you guys are right that, given that, it's good to ally with the people that can share your interests, but it certainly isn't the best world possible when you have to basically dig in your heels and constantly fight just to maintain what you have. But that's basically what you're describing. We have neighborhoods here that have kind of protected themselves by becoming historic districts, but in the process they've had to do all kinds of things, hire lawyers and constantly meet and organize, and and you're right, like, people should know each other and they should work together, but you've got this additional element of you're working together just to protect yourselves against like this sort of faceless and rather like large power, right? So it's always going to be an uphill battle and a fight, and that doesn't sound pleasant. That's not why any of us get into why we get into any endeavor, probably even small business. I mean, there's always an element of competition, but it can be like good competition, or it can be like really unfair competition. And that's what you're describing. I mean, it's not like you can, ultimately competition in the system is ideologically, it's supposed to mean that, well, we all get a little bit more efficient, we get better, and competition makes us, innovate and things like that. But when you're faced with something that's like way bigger and more powerful than you, it's not going to have that effect. You're not going to be able to get bigger and more competitive. You're just going to be able to maybe hang on by your toenails if you've got the right legal help, or the ultimately savvy, like pushback with enough allies. But that doesn't sound sustainable ultimately. It might make you hang on a little bit longer, but you can't fight that battle forever, basically. Yeah. And I mean, we see this all across our economy, right? Like smaller farmers, small and middling farmers going out of business, small and middling businesses that just can't hang on. It's part of an overall trend in all sectors of our economy. And we are losing something in the process. We're losing like human relationships and personality. It's what makes us human. I would rather live in your apartment complex or your apartment building than in that high rise any day.
Oh, yeah. I think it's more, I mean, it felt like a dorm. I don't understand why people live in there, but they're new, at first. But yeah, I don't know. And again, fine if they want to build them, fine. I mean, that's right. I mean, I guess that's capitalism, but it's just like, don't hurt people around you. I mean, we can absorb some costs, like you're not paying your share of property taxes. They're certainly coming for us, but not you guys. But, just don't do any harm or, but the hardest thing for me too is just hearing the lying or the complete disregard. And it's so weird at City Hall too, I realized, but again, we had such a short period of time to mobilize. It was so weird because it's almost that the city can't recognize you if you're just a person. You have to belong to an organization, because they always ask, who are you with? It's like, just me, but they want to know who you're with. It was an interesting way that they organize people.
After this, have you thought about rebranding as like a woman-owned small property management company? That maybe there's a way to like wokeify your branding?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I'll have to think of something, because I'm going to have 34 people that can't park on the street. So I don't know. Everyone's going to be this. I mean, how is that going to look? Am I going to have to say, if you're a girl and don't get home till 11, you get the parking space? I mean, that people get mad at other people that have good parking spaces. I've seen it. It's kind of like if someone takes someone's church pew, You just don't do that. I mean, it's going to be a bloodbath. It's not going to be pretty. It's yeah, I don't know. And I guess when it gets unpleasant enough, I'll have to go. But this parking meter thing, and they're talking about giving us, maybe some permits, but for a building, they've already decided that, if you have a house, you get like so many permits. If you have an apartment building, so many permits. But there is no, it's one size fits all. There's no scientific, the scientific method. There's no, well, oh my gosh, you have an apartment building, you're going to need more than 3 permits. Like, I don't know. The level of incompetence is just scary, really. But again, maybe it's just an agenda and they don't care what we think. So I guess it makes it easier for them to make decisions.
Well, any parting thoughts from either Laurie or Mary?
No, I'll just say it's been really interesting hearing your perspective. I appreciate it. And I hope things work out for the best, but it doesn't sound like a good situation to be in. And I'm sorry about that.
Well, and I want to thank you for saying that. And thank you very much for having me and listening to me. I mean, I'm getting listened to, which a lot of us always wanted. And I appreciate the time to talk about it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And thank you for coming on and sharing the story.